Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Those that are kind of in the audience, and especially to our panelists and speakers, thank you so much for participating with us today. I know your schedules are extremely busy, and we just really so much appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today. We're looking forward to an exciting session here. We've got a great group of panelist speakers here, and we are so excited. We're looking forward to hearing a lot of insights from each one of you. And we look forward to kind of putting some things out there that, you know, all the audience will benefit from, and even all the panelist speakers can benefit from. So without getting more of any delay, my name is Steve Overcash. I'll be the moderator for this session. And I don't know if y'all had a chance to watch the keynote session. That was very, very good. There was a lot of helpful information, insight, you know, shared there as well. So anyways, I'm with Steve Overcash with Georgia United Credit Union. I'm a business development officer with Georgia United, and I'm just thrilled to be able to moderate this session. I was asked to do that, and I'm thrilled to do that. And thank you guys for participating again. The topic, obviously, of this breakout session is safety in our schools. And just a few ground rules to kind of get us started and kicked off, if you will. So the purpose of this panel session, this breakout session, is to share information. Y'all have a lot of insight and examples that you can share with us that are very valuable with respect to kind of how you've dealt with this topic. And, you know, the intent of this session is really not to be kind of a debate of issues, because we know, obviously, there's a lot of hot topics around this subject right now, and a lot of people on a lot of different sides of a lot of issues. But again, we have so much experience on the panel here, and, you know, the purpose of this panel is just to share some helpful insights and information. So that's kind of what we're here to do today. And we look forward to hearing from each and every one of you, and we want to give time for each one of you kind of to contribute. And so kind of the format of the whole session, I'll introduce each of you a little bit, and then as I introduce you, or after I introduce you, just kind of give us a kind of 50,000-foot level of how you're kind of dealing with the pandemic in your, you know, specific institution or company. And then once we finish with the introductions.
How many of you see mostly circles? I only see like Ben and Ben. I don't see anybody else's picture or face.
Okay, you only see a couple of us? Sometimes if you, Angela, maybe if you go to the left-hand side and click on the session again, maybe, and go back in that way, it might restore that. I know a couple of people have had to do that. So that might help you. But call, if that doesn't work for you, you may want to touch base with Stephanie as well, but try that first. So anyway, so once we kind of do the introductions, we'll have some questions that we'll ask each of you, and, you know, kind of give us your response in maybe 5 minutes or so to those questions, and then we'll just kind of go from there. If we have time at the end, we'll ask some questions. We'll take some questions from the audience that might be in the chat session. So that's kind of how we're going to conduct the session here today. So first of all, we have a great panelist here, and again, we just wanted to thank all of you. Let's start with Mr. Estill, and so he's the Chief Operations Officer for DeKalb County School District. He provides leadership and support for the operations division as a member of the cabinet. And you heard Cheryl Watson-Harris on the superintendent on the main keynote, but he's a member of that cabinet of hers. And Mr. Still participates in strategic planning, community interaction, capital programming, budgeting, those kinds of things. He works collaboratively with the school district leaders. He fosters collaboration with the school and community stakeholders to support the school system from a district-wide perspective. So just a few words about him, and Mr. Still, if you kind of give us a 50,000-foot level of kind of what you're dealing with right now within DeKalb County School District.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And I certainly appreciate all of you being here. As we've already said, during this unenviable time of a pandemic, we're all dealing with things outside of the normal paradigm of what we would be doing. Mm-hmm. So I'm just grateful to have collective and collaborative conversations. And I'm certainly very appreciative of the fact that Superintendent Watson-Harris has allowed me some time to talk to it. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about things, and certainly being able to put actions from the things that we talk about collaboratively is the way to go. So to that point, we are addressing a pandemic. normally we would be in school. We would have face-to-face instruction with our students. And the only thing that parents should be worried about would be half days, holidays, vacations, and birthdays. I mean, the life quality of a child. And while a parent or guardian or loved one would release their child to our trust, at the beginning of the day, the only thing that really concerns is they're able to come home. So to that point, my absolute intention is to ensure that we all go home and to set a tone and precedence of comfort and security and confidence in what we're doing. So we have to do that methodically. We now are looking at a anniversary where we have all been abreast with the same specific issues of how do we deal with life, personally and professionally, with something that seems to also want to live. I mean, if the purpose of life is to live, then certainly COVID-19 is trying to find a way and etching its way into existence too. The thing that we know is based on its rather aggressive nature of infection that we made a conscious decision to shut down, as everyone did. Superintendent Harris has decided, and I wholeheartedly agree, that we will follow the data analytics of the numbers. And we will subscribe to those paradigm shifts that have occurred from the same base information that we've received in a triangulation between state, county, and CDC numbers. So by also doing everything basically behind the blackboard, as you said, Stephen, we'll always keep the lights on for you. So the door is always open. We want you to feel comfortable to come on in. We have to look at how do we effectively neutralize a level of, I wouldn't say mistrust, but just a level of this uncertainty. And certainly the hardest thing I think that we all are looking at is how do you make something tangible and certain and confident when it's so ambiguous and so anonymous as to how do we effectively track it. So for the last year, through Governor Moore Sanders and Joanne Harris, we have looked at and we have tracked all of these numbers. We have now memorialized these to look for a trend analysis to seeing whether or not we can see an ebb and flow in the way that the virus has moved. That has been used tactically and strategically as a plan to ensure that when exposure levels have been identified, how do we effectively then neutralize those impacted areas? And again, by following CDC protocols, we look at those high touch and high trafficked areas. We immediately send crews in to clean and disinfect and isolate those areas. Once they're isolated, within that 24-hour period, that should be it. So it meant having our staff understanding, again, that no one will be placed in harm's way. It meant that telling our site-based administrators that they are now coming back into the buildings because they've been out for almost a year, that we have taken a very arduous task of trying to maintain 100+ buildings that were left in the spring in a completely different mode and now coming back in the inclement weather of fall and winter to making the adjustments for that, which means in some instances, HVAC systems and units were currently left in an air conditioning mode. And so when we're blowing out cold air. Well, again, we wouldn't have heat on in March, April, as much as we would have air on. So it means that we're going through case by case, school by school, taking those pieces that we can cross-reference and cross-index to ensuring that not only are we fulfilling the supply orders that we need, the operations, work orders that need to be resolved, but we're also looking and saying, fine, when you come across a problem, then we'll deal with it. So from a real-time perspective, in the last 12 months, we've been able to reduce work orders in excess of 85%. So we have about a 15% open rate. And while that's an ongoing number, it certainly means that for the first time in the district's history, we've ever been this close to 90. It's my absolute point to get us to maintaining a fluid number of a 5%. It's aggressive, but I think it's very obtainable. I think it's very tangible. And if anything that this pandemic has taught us is that in the midst, again, of all this ambiguity and uncertainty, and in these desperate times, that the colleagues that I work with, the staff that I support and work for, have more than risen to the occasion to show the true humanity of what we're trying to do, which is to support our babies and to support a belief that during this time, if we work collaboratively and from a community aspect, that we can do it, which again is why I'm very happy that we're talking now. It's our chance to take that Doppler effect and to amplify and anticipate that message.
Great. We appreciate that, Mr. Still. We know, DeKalb County, third largest school district in the state. And, you had a couple great points there in terms of working as a community and working together and working collaboratively. Superintendent Watson Harris mentioned that in the keynote, that it really and truly does take a village. And that's not just a trite saying.
Not at all.
It takes everybody participating. And so we appreciate that insight and information. Next, we'll move on to Ms. Tasha White. And Tasha, Ms. White is the board chair for the City Schools of Decatur. And so we appreciate her being here today and being on the panel. She has a heart to serve the community and to be a voice to the voiceless. She's a product of both private and public education, believes unequivocally in the value of public education, obviously. And she's been a resident of Decatur since 2011. And so she, one of her strengths is the ability to truly listen, which is, obviously very important right now in today's day and age with what we're dealing with. So it's very important to listen to everything and that's going on around us and try to key in on what the needs truly are from what that feedback provides us. So with a background in social work and small business management, she uses these strengths as she navigates her role as a city school board member. And actually, she's the board chair for the board there in City Schools of Decatur. So we're pleased to have you, Ms. White. So kind of give us again your perspective on what's going on right now and some things you're dealing with at a high level. And once we get around to everyone, we'll kind of dive into some questions. So if you will, just kind of give us a view of what's going on in your world.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, panel. Thank you for having me. I'll just say, you kind of touched on it earlier, Steve, this is such a divisive time right now. And I think that as a board chair and board members right now, we are really focusing on how do we heal our community? How do we heal and get the trust back of our community and our parents? And how do we continue to work together for the best of our children to keep everyone safe? So we've essentially been virtual for most of this time. Our elementary schools went back January 19th, and then our upper middle school and high schools will be going back March 8th. And so we've, essentially tried to work very slow and be very transparent and be able to move things slowly so that we can watch what happens and how do we effectively deal with anything that comes in from some of these changes. So that's essentially what we've been dealing with right now. Contact tracing, of course, is number one. Getting the test is number one. And also working on getting our teachers vaccinated has been one of the main focuses of our district this year.
Okay, great. We appreciate that information. And, you've had your unique set of challenges with going back to some amount of in-person. So we'll get into that probably a little bit later here in the session. That's a little bit different perspective that you'll be able to share with us. Next, let's move on. So we also have on the panel here with us Mr. Ben Leblois. And Ben, by the way, too, this is something, too, I wanted to share with the team. This is a totally different perspective, and I want Ben to kind of explain that. But he's kind of a serial entrepreneur with experience in running businesses in both Africa and obviously the United States. So Ben operates and kind of is a executive director, the Atlanta chapter of Bricks for Kids. And I have to be honest with you, I did not know a whole lot about that organization, but it's exciting. So Bricks for Kids is a STEM-oriented organization that uses Lego to boost student curiosity, proficiency, and aptitude in STEM field and skills. So Bricks for Kids operates after-school programs, in-school programs, and camps in over 150 locations across the Atlanta area, and is partnered with the DeKalb schools, including Briar Vista, Dunwoody Elementary, and also Winbrook Elementary School. So, Ms. Boyd, please just give us a thumbnail sketch of what's going on in your world, and you've got a little bit different perspective here, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Well, thank you, Steve, for having me on this panel. Thanks to the other panelists. I'm eager to hear all of your perspectives. As Steve mentioned, we're a touch smaller than the DeKalb County school districts, and also we come with a different point of view, right? We are a private organization that is a service provider to school districts. So our experience in this pandemic has been a little bit different. What I would say has been the biggest challenge for us, both as an in-school curriculum and service provider, an after-school provider, a curriculum partner to school districts, both and individual schools, both public and private. is the prioritization of stakeholders in decision making. We've got students, of course, as stakeholders. We've got parents. We have administrators of school districts, administrators of individual schools, and then we have teachers in schools. And then we have our own staff of 70 plus teachers that work in our in-person programming division. So every decision that we've had to make, we've sort of had to create a matrix around how is this going to affect every stakeholder. How is it going to affect these people, and who is the stakeholder that needs to be prioritized based on those impacts in each decision we make? So, of course, at the start of the pandemic, when everything shut down, our rush was we had, about 5,500 students throughout the Metro Atlanta area total that were in some form of pipeline in our programming. Those are tied to outcomes. Those are tied to objectives that the school is setting, or that individual parents are setting, or school districts are setting. How do we fill that void without just saying, well, hey, sorry, we can't really meet you in person, so good luck. So we pivoted online initially with great success from March until the end of August. We broke a lot of our own records, and then actually became the largest non-district provider of e-learning services in the Metro Atlanta area. And then school came back in August with all virtual learning, and it all disappeared. Nobody wanted to do virtual programming, whether it was individual students and parents or school district partners, with good reason. The kids are doing a lot of screen time already. So then our decision is, okay, well, we have 70 plus staff members. We have an obligation for multi-year contracts with schools and school districts. How do we fulfill those if we can't be in person and we can't be online, right? It's sort of, at that point, you sort of reach, well, I don't know that there's a good answer here. And I think, like most of you on this panel have experienced, it becomes a case-by-case decision in every situation. For our own staff, their safety, whether they're caregivers, whether they have young children at home that might have some pre-existing conditions, or caregivers for their parents, putting them at risk of sending them back into buildings that are opening and asking us to come back is a difficult situation. But if we don't honor the agreements we have with schools and school districts, then our organization starts to see a pitfall in revenue, which sees our entire staff at jeopardy of being laid off. So it's been a difficult path. I think we've found some silver linings of positivity, but I would say the biggest thing that we have learned is that in every decision we make, we can't just think about one or two stakeholders and go with it and see how it goes. We really have to write down and visualize the impacts, benefits, pros and cons for every single stakeholder that is related to our organization's activities, and see who it impacts, and see, okay, can we make this decision? Who should this decision prioritize? So, where we are now is we are doing some virtual programming. We are back in school with some schools and school districts that have gone at limited capacity and have demonstrated a requisite amount of protocols that make us feel comfortable for our own staff that the safety measures are strong enough. But I think, like all of you on this panel, I think where we have a lot of differences of coming from a different point of view of being a service provider rather than a school. I think the similarity we have is that there's no silver perfect answer that fixes everything, and you really have to be rigorous every time a decision comes across your desk of trying to figure out what's best for all involved. So we're excited that we're hopeful that this year seems to be a little bit more. We're optimistic for the remainder of this year that things are going to get progressively better, not on a straight line necessarily, but in the aggregate. And I think our goal and what we're sort of have an eye towards is how do we pick up with people like everybody on this call? How do we pick up? Do we pick up where we left off, or is there a new sort of dynamic that we have as we emerge out of this? And I think that fluid conversation is going to be really important to help achieve a good solution on everything.
That's some great insight too, and we really appreciate you sharing that, because you mentioned a couple key things there that we may get into a little bit more detail on. And stakeholders, there's obviously a whole lot of them that are in play when you're trying to make decisions. And so it's kind of like you said, you kind of have to consider all of that, and it's hard to kind of see all that across the spectrum at once. It's obviously very important to me, so we may kind of get back to that in a minute. So kind of to round out the panel, we have with this, and we're excited to have two principals from DeKalb County School District. So they'll be able to kind of give us kind of a boots on the ground, level perspective as a principal and what they are, kind of dealing with their individual schools. So first we have Principal Mrs. Bianca Hamilton, and she's a principal of DeKalb Elementary School of the Arts, and that's a kindergarten through 8th grade performing arts magnet school in DeKalb County School District. She began her career as a teacher in 1994. Cartersville City Schools, and served as a teacher for 10 years with City Schools of Decatur. Became an education program specialist with Georgia Department of Education, and subsequently school improvement coordinator, and assistant principal, and now principal within DeKalb County. And she was recognized as a district principal of the year in 2018, I believe. And so Principal Hamilton, kind of give us your perspective at a high level. And then we'll probably have some specific questions for you too as we get into the question section.
Good morning, everyone. And from a high level, it's almost compartmentalized for us as principals. It feels like pieces keep unraveling, and so the level of how we view this and do this is from a very I wouldn't say, because things change so much daily. We have to keep that level just like that. So for us, it's all about, well, for me, it's all about this is my place. 3131 Old Rock Bridge Road is a place that I'm responsible for. So from that, I finally embraced that this is the place that I need to take care of. We started with making sure that things were in place here. The building is clean. Is it organized? Will people even feel comfortable coming here? Because that's our goal. Our goal is for children and teachers who come back to this place to teach and learn. And so my big high level focus was, is this going to be a clean, orderly place for children to learn? The teaching part is high level. It was already happening online. So I really shifted my focus to making this a safe place. I think the big eye opener for me, we started doing map testing, and parents had the opportunity to do that face to face. And when the children hit the building yesterday, it just brought a whole different view about what we're doing right now, and a whole different energy about what the focus is right now. So from a high level view, it started out with the building, and then it narrowed down to bringing the teachers. And then now that I've had my opportunity to put my eyes on some children, now I'm at this, all right, now I can chunk to children. So for me, I kind of stair-stepped it to make the whole picture come together.
Right, that's awesome. And again, from on the ground perspective, you're dealing with issues right there that hit you, day to day within your school, and that's a great perspective on that. We appreciate that. So the other principal we have with us today, and we're just so excited to kind of have, we have kind of all different views here, and so that's why we're excited, because at some point that all dovetails, right? And we'll kind of see that as we move forward. But we have with us Principal Angela Thomas-Bethea, and she's the proud principal of Barack H. Obama Elementary Magnet School of Technology, and that's located in South DeKalb County. And that's a school that's multicultural technology. It's a multicultural technology school. It provides students with a total education in a lot of different areas: academic, social, and emotional learning. Kindergarten, obviously, through 5th grade. Barack Obama Elementary School Magnet School of Technology houses a technology magnet program in grades 3 and 5, and a kindergarten and 1st grade Spanish immersion program. The faculty consists of roughly 60 teachers, including a variety of specialists: technology, math, music, art, STEM, obviously science, reading, ELL, and 19 paraprofessionals. So I don't know how you manage all that every day, Principal, but kind of give us your perspective on what's going on with your school right now.
So can you all hear me? We're having a few technical difficulties, but we're moving forward. Okay. We have about 1,100 students enrolled here. Our school serves the spectrum of the population. Like you said, we have a magnet technology program. So we were very strong with the technology here. All of our students have been using one-to-one devices from day one. And so we just strengthened our teachers in that area, and we were able to implement the virtual learning platforms with fidelity. We do miss our children in the just the mere fact that we serve the full spectrum of students. We have high poverty students. We have students who are highly supported by parents. And then we have some students who have very little parental support. And so my concern for our school was losing those students who did not have the parental support that they needed. And so we had to approach the virtual learning in a different way, where our paraprofessionals would go out to the apartment complexes. We found a lot of students in the stairwells trying to navigate the virtual platforms, and we would have to put on our masks and go to the stairwells to help our students log in. So it was a hands-on approach, even in a virtual platform. We had students who were in daycare centers. We had to go to daycare facilities and set up meetings with the management to ask them to support us so that we could support our students, because they were placing students in rooms and no one was assisting them in any way. And we just really had to put our feet on the ground and go find our students. We put some communication protocols in place to reach students that we were not able to contact. And so we were able to retrieve a lot of students. We had someone in the building every day, even during the quarantine, once they allowed us to come back into the buildings, to help parents with the technology. If they had questions, someone would step outside of the building and work with the parents to help them log on. So it's a totally different perspective. We know that a lot of our students will need intense remediation when we return. That's a reality for us. We know that students have lost a lot of instructional time, and that we're going to have to dig deeply to reach them when they return. There's going to be a period of intense remediation, and so we're planning for that. Every school is different, and so we're addressing the needs. The biggest thing we had to overcome with returning to the building was the fear. Fear was major for our faculty and staff. They were afraid to come back into the building, but we have established some safety protocols. We had to communicate those protocols and be very strict about enforcing them to make the staff members feel a little more comfortable. We're not fully there yet, but we are working each day to ensure them that we're trying to keep them safe while trying to transition our students back into the building.
Great, awesome. And you brought up a great point. And several of you have mentioned this. It's again, in getting back to the point of just listening, you have to meet people and environments that they're in, where they're at.
Right.
Just exactly where they're at, whether they're in the hallway or stairwell, or they're at home or wherever. You kind of have to, depending on who that audience is, you have to meet them exactly where they're at and go from there. And there's no, one size fits all. And all of you have touched on that issue as well. So we really appreciate everyone's perspective and some very, very helpful insight already on those types of things that you mentioned. So let me go back to Mr. Estill, and I guess kind of talk about maybe some challenges that you see going forward. And you mentioned, and I know that you're following a lot of different protocols and guidelines.
Yes.
And the principal here just mentioned some things that you're doing to make schools and environments and facilities safe. Maybe touch on that just a little bit more. And that's obviously a very complex process. And you talk about individual situations. There are some of those, but globally, there's a whole lot that I know you're doing to kind of ensure all of that, is happening day by day. And if you approach, maybe going back, all those things will be, put in place. And so it'll be as safe as an environment as possibly can be. So kind of touch on that just a little bit more.
I guess the first thing, Steve, is, again, systemically, we're all dealing with the same issue. And since we're dealing with the same issues, we're also trying to find the same points of solution. So the first tangible thing is, do I have enough personal protection equipment in? Do I have enough for consumption of my schools? Do I have enough in consumption from a fulfillment order to have an effective buffer, not just to supply and fulfill what's needed, but to backfill? And again, we're the third largest in the state, but I mean, we are one of hundreds of school districts which all have the same need. And part of what you try to do is to build bridges. And certainly to the city of Decatur, I'd like to absolutely talk about my colleague, Sergio Perez is the COO, outstanding, and has certainly reached out to me, being 66 days old as a Georgian, and extending said, hey, however I can help, let me know, then I'm here. And we exchange information. We talk once a week on the same issue. So I think part of it is not to get, again, to a desperate position of saying we need to hoard information or we need to hoard supplies. We need to share collaboratively. And I think back, 360 degrees from my initial point, the biggest hurdle is doing that, is ensuring that we all have more than enough. So certainly from a tactical perspective, our goal is to make sure that each school has a minimum of 2 months of a supply of PPE in their respective schools, which would include disposable towels and rags, disinfectant, cleaner, face shields, masks, gloves, and then moving forward, again, preparing for that one point where we're no longer, hopefully, in a hybrid or staggered schedule, but just into a full schedule of having full academic instruction. Once you get that, I mean, again, it's making those tangibles, which seemed intangible, obtainable. So if I have security in knowing that I have proper resources and supplies in those buildings, I have them in my warehouse. And the next question is, again, from a capacity perspective, the storage space that I had was specifically geared for the things that we use every day. And so now the question is, how do I effectively track those assets for PP&E, keeping them so they can move in a very fluid capacity and still take in all of the other things that I was buying on normal daily operations to begin with. So it starts with, again, strategically, how do we do that? And we are creating a dedicated warehouse just for PPE, so we can do both at the same time. I think it means that we have to get creative as we look forward to it. As far as, again, for training of our staff, it means that we have to make all of us, I mean, again, we're educators, we're administrators, but we're in a learning environment. So from that standpoint, wherever the student, we're learning every day with this. And so it means that as we find things that are more effective in training, as I said, we're going to follow the protocols because we have to give a public trust in saying that, hey, the county, the state, and CDC absolutely have everyone's best interest at heart. They have a public trust at heart. So we're going to follow those guidelines that they give us. So all of our cleaning protocols are based on that. All of our training will be based on that. And then again, tactically moving forward, I just created a life, health, and safety task force within the division, which is comprised of building, vehicle, and just construction. So all of my compliance and code people are all now in one tank, literally. They'll be hosted in one building, and then they will be going through, and their first directive is to go through a point of escalation for call points of every site base that we have, both instructional and non-instructional, within the district, and then to follow by state code given, to follow by board policy, and then come up with effective standard operating protocols, find out what needs to be amended, what doesn't need to be amended, what works, what doesn't, and then to make it very digestible. So I'm not looking for them to create another list that collects dust on the shelf. I'm looking for them to create a fluid environment, just as you have here, where they have good talking discussions with their colleagues, with those site-based administrators, because then it's no longer a program of the day. It's just an institutionalized piece, which is being more than infused into the culture. So my biggest issue, again, being 66 days old, is how do I effectively infuse a culture that is absolutely ready to have change. You can come into some cultures and you can find them to be either regressive in nature or to be a slow moving, but it's a very quick and fluid current into that, which for where we are right now is the perfect time for it. Based upon, again, dealing with this pandemic and looking at what do we need to do to increase the security, this again is the perfect segue, because as we are getting ready for our comprehensive master plan, strategic looking at how do we improve the quality of life of education in our buildings, either by adding to them, renovating them, or creating new structures. Then we also have an opportunity with our referendum in November for SPLOST 6 to say this is how we find it. So again, from a communal aspect, we go to our principals, we go to our community members, we find out what their needs are. We find out what those needs are. We take the existing 5-year plan that's currently recorded with the state. We take lessons learned to what worked and what did not. We find out where the needs are academically for our community, and then we build. Wherever those stop gaps are, then we fill those gaps with SPLOST. And so that's it in a nutshell for it. But everything that we do will be based on numbers. It will be because the numbers can defend and stand for themselves. It will be based on the methodologies of having fluid, transparent, and community collaborative conversations and actions. And those action plans and communication plans should be more than synced and should be absolutely hand in hand. So that's my perspective of where we move. And then collectively, it's just a point of having commitment. And I think we do that by what we're doing now. It's one day, one breath, one handshake, one conversation at a time, not losing the organic piece that makes us professionals, makes us humans, but makes us people. It makes us parents. It makes us uncles. It makes us aunts. And not getting caught on the fact of the maybe social topography of what politics may be involved, because there is no red, there is no blue, there's only love for babies. And so that's what we have to do. Concentrate on that and put everything based on that and move based on that.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And a couple of great takeaways from there, I think. And obviously, it's a very comprehensive plan. You peel the onion back just a little bit, and there's a lot of moving parts that have to be coordinated and well orchestrated. But at the end of the day, like you were mentioning, kind of love for the person and the environment kind of brings all those elements together. And the other key thing I wanted to kind of mention that you keyed on too, and Ms. White, I'm going to ask you to make a few comments about that. And that is, there's a lot of collaboration going on between just the people on the panel here. And so that's how we kind of collectively attack all of this and come up with these creative solutions. I know he had mentioned, Ms. White, that he's in conversations with his counterpart on your side. So kind of talk about, though, if you will, for a minute, just a quick minute, maybe how y'all have pivoted and some lessons learned since you've kind of gone back to some in-person instruction.
Absolutely. So I think that I like the idea that we started off with just the K through 5, because that did give us an opportunity to really look at what are some of the pitfalls, what are things that we need to change. So for example, we've had some people come in the building that may have had a runny nose, but they thought it was just allergy, and then find out later on that day or on the next day that they are in fact, have the virus. And so getting available testing on site for our nurses. So if there's any question, we can find out in 15 minutes if somebody is ill, and then they can go ahead and leave the building. So I think that's going to be very important, especially when we open back up for our middle schools and our high school. We don't have lunch in the buildings right now. That was one of the biggest concerns, and where we've seen a lot of where the virus could potentially spread is when people are sitting around and eating and talking and don't have masks on. And so pivoted from making sure that in-school instruction was just for core classes, and then our students go home, they have lunch there, and then all of their either world language or special classes are done virtually. So this way we're getting the opportunity for our children to be in the building so our teachers can see our kids because they've missed them so much. This is especially important for their mental health, and being able to have some kind of socialization with other kids and with their teachers. So we're addressing that, and also at the same time addressing how do we continue to keep everyone safe. And so it's the not eating in the buildings is where we've done some of that pivoting. One other pivot that we're making as well as transition in between classes for the students used to be about 4 minutes, and we all know that look of rushing kids trying to get from one class to another, that can be potential for spread. And so we've stressed our transition, our morning transitions, and also between class transitions to about 15 minutes, so that they can be staggered and they can be intentional, so that the kids are not kind of all rushing into the hallway at one point. So those are a couple of things that we kind of had to think outside of the box, look at where other school districts have had some issues and how we can learn from them, since some of them have been back in person longer than we have, and that, as Benjamin was saying, collaborating, learning how, because I mean we're in this together. I mean, we could go into the politics of it and where this, where the leadership potentially should have come from way up top and how schools handle this, but it didn't. So we, as our school boards and school DeKalb County, we have to work together and figure out how best to move forward together, because we're all in this together. Nobody is immune from this, unfortunately.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And that, obviously, that's an overarching, common thing that we've talked about today. And I think if nothing else, if people don't take away that the fact that it takes all of us together, working together, we've got different perspectives on the continuum here. We've got, DeKalb County school district getting ready to go back. We've gone back a little bit. We've got the information from the principals that have shared with us kind of what's going on at their level, on the school level. So I think all of this has come together in a great fashion, and I think the information has been extremely helpful. And actually, from a Bricks for Kids perspective, that's we're awesome. We're excited. Your awesome program going on right now with that, and we appreciate that, because that kind of adds a little bit different element. And so we appreciate that. That kind of folds in with what we're all doing. So that's a neat perspective, and it helps with the STEM, obviously, and we've mentioned that here as well. So again, I can't be more pleased with all of your contributions today and insights. I think it's been valuable. I think there's a lot of things we can take away and apply going forward. And again, the biggest piece of all that, I think, is it's an encouragement for us all to kind of continue sharing this information with each other, and grow together throughout this pandemic. And together, we can tackle this and move forward. So we're out of time, and but again, I appreciate so much your participation. And we wish you the very best going forward here. This will be some things that we're going to have to address and pivot with again. But I know you all are fully capable and confident to make all that happen in a great way. So hats off, and thank you again for participating with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Be safe, everyone.
Yeah, be safe. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much.